Heather, welcome back. Thank you again for joining us. We're back again with another episode of SEO from home. We're back. Sorry, guys, my Slack's going crazy. We're back with another episode of SEO from home. Today, we're back with a familiar face you guys might know from our previous webinars, as well as a Page One Power, a Pages Magazine contributor, Heather Physioc. We're super excited to have her back today. Heather is going to be giving us the lowdown on why bosses are not implementing your awesome suggestions. So for those of you who don't know, Heather is going to be the Group Director of Discoverability over at VMLY&R. I always have to make sure I hit all of the letters in there. And today we're just going to kind of let her go through a presentation she's put together. We're going to be talking about some ideas that maybe a little bit outside of what we normally kind of discuss inside of the SEO space. This is a little bit more, I think, kind of the soft skill side of things. So we're super excited. I'll let Heather go ahead and take it from here. As she's giving her presentation, remember guys, we have the Q&A box down at the bottom. She's gonna be going through her presentation, so if you have questions, definitely pop those in there. We'll try to get to them in the moment if we can. If it's gonna be addressed later, we may not get to it. Otherwise, we'll definitely get to all of those at the end. We're gonna be live streaming today again, so if you guys wanna catch this later on, you can definitely do so at pageonepower.com. We usually try to have those up in about 24 to 48 hours for you. We're also going to be live tweeting today, so if you guys want to participate online through Twitter, you can always tag us at PageOnePower, use hashtag SEO from home, and Heather, of course, is at Heather Physioc. So if you guys want to participate that way, definitely feel free to chime in there. Without any further ado, Heather, I'm going to go ahead and let you take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so very much, Ben. Appreciate everybody who's making the time to join today. I know it's a weird time and a weird situation, but hopefully if things are slowing down a little bit for you right now, you are seeking out great education and training just like this one to make the most of the time. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to switch over to sharing my screen. Of course, I'm sure Ben will shout if it doesn't work.
There we go. Got your desktop.
Awesome. All right, great. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is all about why clients and bosses hear your great SEO or paid search or other digital marketing recommendations, and for whatever reason, they seem to fall flat. They don't actually get implemented. And I know this is a chronic challenge that search and digital marketing professionals face. So I wanted to dive in and understand why it happens and learn how to actually solve for that chronic challenge. So a quick narcissism slide about me. Like you said, I'm Group Director of Discoverability at VMLY&R, and that includes 3 distinct teams: our organic search practice, the paid search practice, and the performance content practice. I'm a 2-time entrepreneur with small businesses, but ultimately I have converted full-time to agency life because I find it exciting and challenging, and there's plenty of good big problems to solve. I have a bachelor's of journalism with emphasis in advertising from the University of Missouri, and my master's of executive business administration from Rockhurst University. I've been doing this a long time, and you'll find me on certain international search conference stages like MozCon, Search Love, and Write in SEO, so I hope to see some of you there. I welcome connections on LinkedIn and Twitter if you ever want to say hi or talk shop. So at VMLY&R, these are a few of the awesome clients that we have the good fortune of working on. So I want to talk to you candidly today about some of the challenges that we experience as search professionals, regardless of the type of client, and hopefully give some insight into why that happens on the client side or on your boss's side if you're in-house. So just because a client signed a contract with you or your boss hired you doesn't automatically mean that they're actually bought into the services that you offer. I know it seemingly defies logic that they are paying money for your services and yet nothing goes live. It can be this slow, arduous process to get even small projects pushed through. And I know how frustrating that can be. And it seems like the larger the clients or the organizations, the more complex and difficult those obstacles can be. There's just more complexity in businesses that are bigger with more people or more business units or more services, right? And when you don't see your work actually getting used, I know that it sucks. It can lead to you or your team becoming impatient, fed up, discouraged, frustrated, jaded, feeling inadequate, feeling burned out. There's a whole lot of negative effects that roll downhill when stuff doesn't go live, especially as that goes over an extended period of time. And all the while, even though this stuff isn't going live, you've got your client or your boss still asking for the SEO results that they paid for. It's a very contradictory environment, seemingly, right? So what exactly stands in the way of our recommendations going live? I think I've experienced this phenomenon everywhere I've worked, whether I was in-house or agency side. And as much as we were experiencing this when I created this talk, I knew we weren't alone in this. And so I set out to find out why it is. So I surveyed over 100 colleagues in our industry to learn more about this common experience that we all share and what causes it, and most importantly, how we overcome it. So I collected 141 surveys. The results were roughly 1/3 in-house marketers who do search for their own companies, and 2/3 external marketers who are providing their services to external clients. So that could be small biz, enterprise, freelancer, as long as they're serving other clients with search services. Respondents range from in-house SEOs to people who are embedded with multi-service agencies and consulting firms to content marketing shops, and all the way to those who are simply self-employed. And we asked about obstacles that fell into 4 main categories. One was low understanding of search, either inside the agency or on the client side, prioritization of and buy-in for that search work. We asked about corporate bureaucracy, things like red tape, slow approvals, advocacy or lack thereof, and high turnover rate, either on the agency side or the client side again. And then we asked about resource limitations, like access to developer hours or budget. On the agency side, the most common blocker to recommendations getting implemented, people said, was low client understanding of search, feeling like our clients just didn't get it. And on the in-house side, the primary blocker tended to be technical resource limitations for things like developers, or perhaps a full backlog with too many projects to chip through. So SEO projects tend to get deprioritized. And some people actually, beyond the blockers that we offered them, some people actually wrote in additional blockers. And the most common ones that we saw pop up, hopefully these don't hurt too bad to hear because I know they sound familiar to some, workflow bottlenecks, overcomplicated processes, lack of ownership, internal politics, shifting budgets and priorities. And there are a lot of people in this community that are experiencing this, and it's standing in the way of us getting our best work done. It hurts. It hurts a lot. It gets old, and we need to do something to change it. And when we get frustrated, let's be honest, we tend to blame clients. We say the client hangs up the process, or if the client had only listened, or it's a problem with the client's business. And sometimes, to be fair, that is true, but ultimately, I don't buy it. And neither should you. Sometimes the problem is the system, sometimes the problem is the people, and my friends, sometimes the problem is you. We're not perfect. When we start working in search, we're trained on how to execute the work and the best practices. And we come to conferences and we watch webinars like this, and we learn these amazing advanced SEO techniques on the cutting edge of the industry. But rarely are we focusing on the soft skills that are needed to sustain and to grow the work, to break down barriers with our bosses and clients, and to get buy-in and get real work done. But fortunately, we are search professionals. We are all optimizers. We all inherently believe that things could be just a little bit better. We refuse to believe that this is just the way things are and that there's nothing that we can do about it. So when I did this survey exercise and this research project, I didn't just ask about the problems, I also asked about the solutions. And after analyzing these responses, I found 7 tools that came the most highly recommended to overcome common obstacles to doing your best search work. So let's dig in. Number 1 is simply diagnosing your client's maturity, not emotional maturity. That is a totally separate conversation. This is maturity as it pertains to search, both their capabilities in search and their organizational aptitude for search. A lot of times we make the mistake of assuming that a client is knowledgeable and bought in and motivated to execute search work simply because they paid us to do it. So we go trucking full speed ahead, we're dumping recommendations in their laps, and then we're surprised when they're not as excited about the work as we are, and the work doesn't actually get implemented. And this is where a maturity model can help. So maturity model, what is it? Originally, these were developed for the Department of Defense, but a maturity model at its most basic measures the ability of an organization to continuously improve in a practice. So in order to apply this to our search clients, we need to diagnose their current maturity, where are they at today, and then identify where it is that they want to go and where they should focus their efforts next. This tool helps us meet the clients where they are and then walk alongside them as they grow. So let me walk you through what that looks like. So to start, there are two distinct maturity models that we're going to talk about here. They're very different types, and I think they have different applications. The first one is about search capabilities, and this maturity model ranks 8 criteria against 6 phases of maturity. In this particular version of the model, I used analytics usage, collaboration, integration with other disciplines, content mobility, on-page, off-page, technical SEO, and the adoption of new search technology. The great thing about this is it's vast and expansive. The trouble with this is as the search industry changes, this model is going to need to be refined. So this is what the maturity curve looks like for search capabilities. We do this in 6 key phases. Stage 0, a client that is at stage 0, we call this chaos or counterproductive. This is when they are engaging in harmful or even damaging SEO practices. Think spammy or black hat type behavior where they could get caught and penalized or dropped out of the index, whatever it may be. If a client is stage 1, this means their SEO is basically non-existent. They have no strategy or implementation. Assume that search is an all-new program for this type of client. From there, we move into tactical, where they're doing maybe basic SEO best practices, but nothing earth-shattering. From there, they're becoming more strategic, so they're aligned to the value of SEO, and they're making effort to dedicate resources and improve SEO implementation. They're starting to bake search into key initiatives that they're working on. By the time we get to stage 4, search is becoming a practice. The inclusion of SEO is an expectation for their marketing initiatives. Not only best practices, basic best practices, but actively testing and iterating with new search techniques. And finally, the enlightenment version of this maturity curve is when search is a culture at a company. This means that SEO is basically always included, and we're aiming to maximize optimization with the absolute latest cutting edge best practices. These kinds of brands are future-proofing their SEO programs and evolving as the industry standards evolve. So how do we know where your client falls? We might use something like this, which is a maturity modeling scorecard. So this is used to evaluate the client against each of these different capabilities criteria. This particular maturity model, which we'll make sure to publish on Page One Power so you have access to this as well. This was evaluated by a lot of really smart people in the industry to determine what the specific checks should be at each phase. But again, this needs to be refined as our industry standards change. So this is intended to be a living document that evolves as our field does. So don't worry, I will give you a link so you can actually read this and use it yourself. But let's think through a couple of these just for funsies. So let's just say we're assessing the maturity of the client as it pertains to SEO for content. So they could range from, on the low end, thin, weak, duplicative, even over-optimized copy, stuff that could be harmful to them. Maybe in the middle, they are implementing basic SEO best practices either during or after publication, but search data is rarely used to inform content creation, and SEO can often be an afterthought. And then on the high end of maturity for content for SEO, we know that search insights are driving that digital content strategy alongside other channel inputs. Okay, that's one example. Let's look at mobility. Perhaps a brand on the low end has no mobile experience at all. Whereas someone in the middle, let's just say they have a fully responsive and technically mobile friendly website, but they're not really paying any special attention to mobile optimization. And then on the highest end of the scale, they may be a brand that has an entirely mobile first mindset against usability, speed, and content optimization. Maybe they're doing app store optimization and voice search for automotive and mobility on in-home assistant speakers or something like that. And then one more, let's talk new technology in search. So on the low end of the scale, we may have a brand that has no understanding or focus on new evolutions in search whatsoever, to the client in the middle who maybe has an appetite for it, but they tend to chase the shiny objects with not a lot of focus on strategy or end goals, to a brand on the high end of maturity here that is actively implementing and testing new technology and capabilities in search that can impact their search performance and make sense for their brand. Like they're thinking strategically about which things to go after and which ones not to go after because it's not right for their brand. So this is an awesome tool to start picking out projects. Tactically, I think it can be very valuable, but I want to be honest with you, this doesn't get to the real heart of why our work doesn't get implemented. The real maturity challenges tend to be organizational. These are people and integration and process problems. And doing a search maturity assessment of the organization instead of just their technical capabilities can open our eyes to the kinds of problems that need to be solved internally before our best search work can be done. So this, to me, is a much stronger organizational search maturity model. So on the low end, we have clients that maybe are very limited in their search capabilities. They have a disjointed approach, or they're just entirely new to doing search. After that, we have those in the repeatable stage. They have a feeling that SEO is important. They're just starting to implement the basics, but it's ad hoc, very reactive. In the middle, we have a brand where search is defined for their organization. These are ones that are starting to document their process and their standards. They're becoming more proactive, more strategic, goal-oriented, but they often tend to be siloed still. When they evolve to the managed phase of this maturity curve, they have defined their process and they're continuously improving that process and their standards and their quality assurance. They become more strategic, they become more savvy, and thus they become more flexible and adaptable in the face of change. They're able to quickly detect problems or opportunities with their search program and then refine it. They have dedicated staff, they're committed to search. Search is starting to become a way of life. And on the highest end of this scale, I consider this the enlightenment of this maturity model. This is the utopia, where they're truly an optimized brand. This is when search is part of this company's DNA. Search is baked into every marketing practice and it's integrated across the organization. They are always proactively iterating, improving, maybe even innovating. These organizations are the market leaders and they know that their work is never done. So this is a sample scorecard to assess the client's organic search program maturity. As you can see, it addresses things like process. Do they have repeatable processes defined, and is search consistently included in those processes? Are they growing and improving those processes? It includes things like resources and personnel. Do we have the right talent at the organization or the right talent scoped in from the agency to get the work done? And do we know who clear owners are of different pieces of the work? It addresses stuff like skills and knowledge. Does the organization or your client at the organization understand the basics of search, at least the potential impacts or limitations of search? And are they prepared to learn more as the industry changes? We know that this isn't static. So are they sort of the old school mindset that they're not listening, not willing to learn more as things change? Prioritization. So basically, does the organization think that search is a priority? Are they budgeting appropriately for this? And are they prioritizing it against competing demands? We know that search is just one part of a larger marketing mix, but is it getting adequate prioritization? And finally, planning. I think every SEO on earth is experienced in being an afterthought at best, where if they bring you in, it's after the fact to optimize something that's already done, but it feels retrofitted. So this point of the maturity model is about whether search is proactively included. Is it planned for? Is it driving the strategy, or is it retrofitting after the fact? So how do we assess the brands on this maturity curve? So we conduct a survey that allows us to understand the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities of the brand's organic search program. It intentionally seeks the perspective of people at different levels, vertical levels across the organization, but also in different disciplines across the client or the brand's organization. This helps us get a robust, well-rounded, hopefully 360-degree view of the organization's search maturity. So we create the survey, we ask our clients to distribute it far and wide to not just practitioners in their agency, but people who are impacted by the search work, different business unit stakeholders, CMOs, you name it. And we want, just to be clear, we want people's perspectives who don't know anything about search just as much as we want the perspectives of those that do. Because the people who don't know about search are very insightful as to why they don't know about search and why things might not be getting implemented. So the numerical scoring, from strongly disagree to strongly agree, that's very useful. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But I also want to emphasize the open form content field, because that is where we get the really magical answers. And let me show you an example of that soon. So when we ask questions, again, we go from, it's a 5-point Likert scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. I don't know is also an option, and I find that to be equally insightful. And then we have that open-ended answers field. But these are just a few examples of the questions we might ask. I hear about outcomes, results, or performance of SEO projects. I want to know more about SEO and how it affects my role at the organization. Or we allocate the right amount of personnel to make search successful. So everyone who takes the survey gets these kinds of questions regardless of their role. And then we calculate the score. So this is the highest level summary. We sort the 5 criteria from strongest to weakest. We also aggregate all of the survey answers into a single summary score, which is how we map where they are on that curve. And the goal is to find the strengths that a brand has that we can capitalize on, areas that are okay, but they could be great with a little bit of elbow grease, and the weaknesses that they need to improve upon if they're going to move up that curve. So having this conversation helps us to agree on the areas that they should focus and how we should get started tackling that change together. So scores are great. I'm super pro scores. And that visualization is super helpful for the clients. It sparks some very good conversation. But these anonymous open-ended answers, we share those as well to really help the truth hit home. These open-ended answers are most insightful to uncovering those pain points and broken links inside the organization. So these 2 quotes here are real quotes that came from real clients out of this survey. And this kind of information is so valuable when you're packaging and making your recommendations. So the first one, I'm very concerned that we've had multiple internal leaders and external agencies on this effort and no meaningful progress has been achieved or reported. So that to me tells me that we have an efficiency and effectiveness problem. If we are getting results, no one knows about it. So that is also a marketing problem. So that tells me that we need to be very sure that we're focusing on measurability, improving results, and then marketing those successes and learnings out to the organization. The second quote, content creation has historically been an emergency. Because of this mentality, there's zero strategy to content creation and therefore zero optimization done proactively. That tells me we have a process problem. There are steps missing or an entire process may be missing where stakeholders need to be educated and included in the content creation process. Very insightful stuff that a number alone couldn't have told us. Excuse me. So to be clear, this is not just punching numbers on a spreadsheet. This is not just a one-sided assessment where I, the agency, judge harshly my client on the other side. This is a collaborative exercise. My mouth is very dry from talking a lot. So we ask relevant people at multiple levels across the organization to participate in this exercise too. And then we have real one-on-one conversations to unlock useful insights. And then based on the survey outcomes, the scores, the open-ended answers, we identify no more than 3 top priority areas for the client to focus in year 1 to improve their search program and move up that curve. When you focus on more than 3, you lose focus. There's no prioritization at all when everything's a priority. So some of the things that we have prioritized for clients include breaking down silos in their organizations, improving education about search, and marketing search successes inside their organization. And of course, we propose solutions. So based on the key areas of focus, we identify how we're going to take action. We have to clearly outline what the client must be responsible for and ways that we see that we as a search partner can help. So it might be specific tactical activities like we're going to create one-sheeter case studies to talk about the results of our projects and market our successes. Or perhaps we're going to create a unified editorial calendar across different work streams and business units so we can start to align those content workflows instead of having 20 different content processes at the organization. Or perhaps we're going to allocate more points in development sprints to SEO needs to make sure that that stuff is getting prioritized alongside other competing demands. And this way, everyone knows exactly who owns what, and then, of course, we ensure that we deliver and follow up. So in order to know how to get where you're going, you need to know where you are. Having multiple perspectives on this exercise helps you to build a more accurate picture of where the client stands. And if everyone works together on the assessment and agrees on where we're going together, that's early buy-in and alignment to get real stuff accomplished together. And a maturity curve is a continuum, right? So you have to evolve from one step to the next. You can't just skip levels. That's not an option. Now, most of our clients tend to start in this repeatable phase where they've dabbled a bit, but there's no formality to their process, their knowledge, their execution, and that's where we come in to help. And the goal is not to turn this into exceptional high caliber SEO machine overnight. That would be great, but it's a little bit utopian idealistic, but rather to make iterative, progressive improvements that move them into the next phase. So if they're starting at the repeatable phase, maybe in year 1, we want to get them to the defined phase. And by year 4 or 5, we want to get them all the way up to the fully optimized phase where they're growing and learning and they know their work is never done. And the gap between each phase, time-wise, might become wider as they move up the scale. It should be a little bit harder to move from one to the next. You're solving more complex internal organizational problems. Okay, so I want to take a quick break. That's kind of a heavy chunk. The rest is a little bit faster, but Ben, do we have any initial questions about the maturity model that we need to field?
Yeah, it looks like we do have a question coming in here. John's saying, I love this, but I work for an $85 billion healthcare company and I'm a wolf pack of 1. We do have an SEO agency, 2 to 3 people that supports me, but how would you approach this as an enterprise that's this large, or is what you're sharing still valid?
It's funny, I kind of get that question a lot, but I usually get it about small business. Small businesses are like, there's no one here, does this apply? Yeah, it totally applies. But my specialty is actually working in large multinational, multi-billion-dollar enterprise businesses. If anything, this maturity assessment is more valuable and more useful when you're doing it at scale and have that much input from different perspectives. So I do strongly advise it. So I would potentially share this survey out with people across the marketing part of your organization. Your own SEOs should be included in that, but also think about the CMOs, the paid search people, the content creators, the analytics experts. Get all of those perspectives. Then think about the people in different business units. I think you said it was a healthcare and pharma brand. Yeah. Let's just say it's a parent brand organization, and then there's sub pharma brands underneath. Each one of those might be a different business unit, and they may have different priorities or perceptions for search. And you really want to explore that. And when you get a large mass of data, I think my client record was 100 people participated. That was really amazing because the insights we got out of that were remarkable, but I've had as few people as 5. It's tougher to pull insights out of that, but it can work. You can still get meaningful, actionable information. So I hope I fielded that question okay. Do shoot me a note and I'll give you some goodies and custom coaching, we'll say, on how to apply that at the enterprise level.
Awesome. And then there's another question that came in. Andrew's asking, how do you get clients to take the time to fill out a stakeholder survey when it's a struggle to get them even on the phone?
Okay, so first of all, I should say that I have a knack for being supremely annoying. You just ask anybody on my team. But honestly, you really need to get buy-in from your main day-to-day contact to begin with, because they're going to be the ones who are pushing it inside their organization. We have been very fortunate that we have some very strong client advocates, and then we've had others that it's been like pulling teeth. So I feel you, it's hard. But the main thing you can do is talk about why you are doing this and get the client bought in before you ever send them some survey to pass around their organization. You know, tell them what I just told you, that the problems with search are not, you know, whether you can do title tags and meta descriptions well. It's whether you're going to hit buy-in issues or budget issues. Chances are there's some underlying frustration that your client or your boss is feeling inside their organization too. And they might even be looking for proof to be able to tell that story and start to break down those barriers. So bring them along for the journey. Your client should be the one that's sending this out in their organization and deciding who that's going to. And you should coach them to send it out initially, send out one follow-up about midway through the collection period, and send a follow-up when it's like, okay, last call, get it in today. The client that got 100 surveys also offered to buy lunch for a random selected person if they wanted or something like that. So that seemed to really get attention and buy-in as well. I hope that's helpful.
Awesome. And then one last question here. Joe's asking, from your experience, do you notice a significant uptick in implementation rate between 2 maturity stages?
I want to make sure I'm understanding the question. So if someone is a more mature organization, do people implement more stuff? Would you interpret it that way, Ben?
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm understanding it. Essentially, is there a bigger jump from one stage of the maturity scale to the next stage?
Yeah, as far as the volume of stuff that they implement, I don't know that that necessarily ties directly from one phase to the next. They might get more credit for being more mature if they're more likely to implement the work. But I do find that more mature organizations are more receptive to the recommendations, because more mature organizations better understand search and the impact and the value and the limitations of it. So that buy-in is what maturity really results in.
Yeah, it looks like that's good there. We had another one come in. Matt asks, how do you get around spending more time putting together business cases for them to implement things rather than doing actual SEO work?
Story of my life. Well, I mean, part of it is just like the mental acknowledgement and acceptance that if I don't put the work up in the front to persuade them that it's worthwhile, then all of my recommendations are going to be pointless anyway, because they won't go live. So I just consider this to be part of the job. It is my responsibility to make them digestible and understandable and package them in a meaningful way that is easy to implement, easy to approve and provide budget for. That's part of our job. And I think that's where we as SEOs tend to go wrong. We're so obsessed with 301 redirects and canonicalization, and we're not thinking about the fact that they're paying us to know this stuff. They're paying us to make smart recommendations and help them make hard choices. They're not paying us for title tags. Anybody can do title tags. So spending more time putting together business cases, I think at some point you start to sort of build a repertoire of case studies or the why that you can just pull language off the shelf and say, you need to do 301 redirects because, right? You need to do title tags because. We have that language. It's just customizing the why behind it to feel very relevant and unique to that customer and to that customer's business problem. I hope that makes sense. That's a heady question and I really like it. And I know my answer was like, I don't know, just do it because it's part of the job. Yeah, I don't mean to diminish it.
It makes sense. I mean, it's something that almost has to be woven into the groundwork at this point, it seems. I think just because so much and so often that people that are involved have at least some comprehension of it, that they know enough to not know the right things, I've found. It seems like they know enough to where they kind of understand it, but not enough to actually understand the real importance of it. So yeah, I think that's perfect.
Really great
All
question.
the questions we have right there so far.
Okay.
There.
So shall we go back in?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. Can everyone see my screen or no?
Not yet.
JK.
Do a video.
Share screen. Hit button. Share.
There we go.
I swear I work in technology, you guys. Okay, so second tip, maturity model is a heavy lift. We'll make sure you get good resources. But the second tip, you need to speak to CEOs and CMOs, not SEOs. We are speaking to very busy chief executive officers and chief marketing officers, not our fellow SEOs. And we need to learn to listen, to read, to write, and speak their corporate language. They care about things like ROI, earnings per share, operational costs. Meanwhile, SEOs are over here talking about HTTPS and SSL encryption and canonicalization. We just need to be mindful that we are coming from different places and we need to meet our clients in the middle. This is why making that business case is part of the job. So I understand that we are passionate about what we do and we tend to live in the weeds. That's our job. But when we stay in the weeds, when we're talking about our recommendations, you lose your audience's attention fast. So unless your client is a technical mind or has a background search experience, you'd probably stay at 30,000 feet. I do have a few clients who have a background in search and prefer to be in the weeds, and that's great. But I'm going to say the vast majority, you need to bring it up a few levels. Make sure that you're using layperson's language that any business executive can understand. Use analogies, show, don't tell. Use things like smart data visualization and visual examples that make it easy to understand. And I'm going to use our pharma brand that someone popped a question in about. If you're talking to a pharma brand, when you're using visual examples, ideally you would be showing things in the medical and healthcare space that click in their head, that they can relate to, not showing something in automotive that doesn't quite resonate. Anytime you can make it feel custom tailored, you're going to have better outcomes. And remember to focus on outcomes. The goal is not to teach our clients how to do search. Instead, we need to focus on the why they're implementing our recommendations. What's in it for them? Focus on the benefits of the initiative, your recommendation. Is it brand visibility? Is it conquesting competitors? Is it just making more money? Not necessarily the super granular technical steps to get there. Third tip, make sure you're seeking greater perspective. So let's face it, clients do not care about organic search or any search as much as we do. So they may love what we can do for them, but rarely is SEO the only thing or even a sizable thing on their mind. We kind of have a habit of thinking search is the center of the universe. I know it's great, but that's not true. So a lot of times our direct clients or our bosses, they aren't dedicated only to search. And sometimes they're not even dedicated to just digital. They have bigger fish to fry. And they have to think about how the entire marketing mix works for the brand. And SEO is just one small part of that. It's humbling perspective. And so we need to make sure that we're laddering our SEO recommendations up to larger marketing initiatives. More and more clients I'm finding are moving toward integrated agency models, and they want to be able to get more bang for their buck and maximize all of their channels working together. They don't have the mental capacity to think about the granular details of every single channel to make it work. So we need to make sure that we're laddering all of those digital channels up to the bigger picture and that we're supporting those larger marketing initiatives and brand objectives. So otherwise, we would be operating on this completely separate track, making SEO recommendations that no one cares about. So one example, real example, we worked with a CPG brand several years ago where we spent basically all of year one basically checking SEO best practices boxes, and it seemed like no one cared and nothing got done, and it was super, super frustrating. Like none of our recommendations were going live ever. I was like, what's the point? Why are you paying us? But in year 2, our contract was completely restructured in the best way. It made it so that search was dedicated to their campaign schedule throughout the year. Is it what we thought we would be doing? No, it was not checking all the SEO boxes that we had hoped for. But is it finally getting some good search work implemented? Yes, because it's actually focused on things that the brand cares about right now. So it's just another exercise in humility and making hard choices about what to prioritize. And make sure you're choosing those projects based on their goals, not your goals as a search professional. We need to seek that big picture perspective and figure out where search fits into the larger picture. How can we support the larger brand goals? We often find ourselves obsessing over rankings and traffic, over other SEO KPIs because SEO, right? But recommendations should be connected to their real goals, not what we think their goals should be. Traffic and rankings and whatever are great, but if their real goal is to sell lots of hot dogs in the summer, that's what we need to be talking about. Tip number 4 is not to stay in your lane. So brands, like I said, are focusing more and more on integrated agency models. And when they're hiring SEO experts, they're doing this alongside other services. Rarely is SEO the only marketing effort a brand is doing. And they do this with the expectation that all of us are going to be driving in the same direction. And that means we need alignment across the board to be bought into SEO recommendations. We know that our work can't be done in a silo. We depend on lots of other people in order to get our stuff live. So every project requires a full product team. This was the best piece of advice from the survey that I collected. It was to treat all search projects as products, which require a complete product team, including engineering, a project manager, and business side folks. So pro tip, the #1 complaint for search experts is, I wasn't included at the right time. That's the complaint I saw most. Well, newsflash, that is also the #1 complaint from experts in every other discipline that I interviewed. It was really eye-opening for me to hear them say that, because I was like, oh, we're all struggling with the same complaint. So getting buy-in from critical stakeholders early and often in the process is key. It respects the expertise of other disciplines, and it includes them in the process early, just like we as SEOs would want. And it gets the buy-in that makes or breaks your project. So we're often dependent on others to get our work implemented, and we need buy-in across different practices, which means we need to stop operating in these separate swim lanes. That means no more setting goals for ourselves. This means no more skipping the step where we partner with other channels. It means collaborate early and often and align on recommendations instead of just making yours in your separate track. And so that was horizontal buy-in, but you also need vertical buy-in. And buy-in usually happens well beyond your immediate day-to-day client contact or your boss. We have to understand what their role is, like how they're measured, what success looks like to them, and then give them the tools and the voice to sell search internally at the organization. So our recommendations have to support what the C-level cares about just as much as what our day-to-day client contacts responsibilities are. And the buy-in from our internal colleagues first, that horizontal buy-in, helps us to bring a more unified recommendation forward to the client with a stronger and better vetted case. And then our responsibility is to help them understand the benefits and the outcomes, the cost and the opportunity cost, and how this gets them results to achieve their goals. Tip number 5 is to build a bulletproof plan. You have to simplify and make it airtight. We have to take ownership of making search ridiculously easy for everyone to do their parts. We have to clearly outline the requirements, the steps, and the ownership. We need to do the due diligence for a simple step-by-step plan. We need to show how easy and how low the level of effort can really be. A great example of this, my colleague, Chris, he wanted to implement AMP for location pages for one of his automotive clients. And he worked very closely with developers and designers to actually make a mock-up of what the page would look like on mobile devices and made a plan for how they could feasibly execute it. So along with that, he forecasted the cost, the time to complete the project, and the estimated ROI based on case studies around AMP in the space. And he was able to say to the client, basically, all we have to do is remove this little thing and that little thing, squish this menu, change some code, and voila, right? That's a pretty digestible approach that any client can latch onto. Another useful tool is just showing case studies as proof of concept. So I mentioned that Chris used case studies to estimate ROI. This is a great tool as well. So in my survey and in my personal experience, case studies are the leading way to get buy-in to the recommendations you're making. They explain the outcomes and the benefits of the projects that you recommend. They prove that you as an expert or an agency have the chops to actually do the work and get results. And they do the work with someone else's money first to prove that it works. So that reduces that perceived risk that your client or your boss experiences. So even if you don't have your own case studies yet, which you should be working on, others are frequently publishing their work and their case studies and their outcomes in the space, which can help you estimate the potential impact of your work. So also think about what is the opportunity cost. Every decision a chief marketing officer makes is a risk, right? There's a time and there's a cost associated with it. It might not work. And everything that they choose to do comes at the cost of something else. There's an opportunity cost of something they can't do because they're prioritizing their resources elsewhere. So we have to understand their competing priorities and their limited budgets and help them to navigate that. I know that search folks, especially organic search folks, are hesitant to forecast potential outcomes just due to the sheer volume of unknowns. And it's really hard to commit to something that we can't be certain about, but that's every forecast. Like, forecasts are always wrong. We still have to know why we are recommending some projects over others. And there is a wealth of information available to come up with even conservative estimates with lots of caveats. Even ballpark figures and ranges are better than offering no sense of return whatsoever. The client has to know how to weigh one project against the next. Just be sure to be transparent, cite your sources, and how you arrived at those numbers in case they get questioned or you need to adjust your model. So quick exercise, homework, hope you studied. So let's pretend that case studies for AMP projects suggest a conversion rate increase between 10% and 50%. So if the client already averages 737 phone leads per month with a 38% conversion rate and a value of $922, ambitiously, a 50% bump in conversion rate would net an additional $128,000 per month. Okay, now let's do the conservative side of that. Let's just say it increases at 10% bump. That could generate an additional $25,000 per month. Okay, so 25 to 128. And let's just say the cost of the project is $30,000. If we get the conservative increase, and we increase their revenue by $25,000 a month, it'll take us 5 weeks to break even and profit. If we get that 50% increase though, to $128,000 a month, we can break even and profit in 1 week. Now that is a term that any CMO, CEO, CFO can understand. So if I'm a client, that payoff is a no-brainer. And even though these dollars and cents look huge on the face, the risk is low if it takes less than 2 months to turn into ROI for the project, and it creates sustained growth thereafter. And the opportunity for growth is not always enough to light a fire under a client or a boss. Sometimes you need to demonstrate the negative impact of inaction or incorrect action. Often the biggest risk that brands face is not necessarily making the wrong move, it's making no move at all. So here's another tool that we've used, this atrophy versus growth model, to show the difference between if a client actually chooses to invest in what we're recommending versus maintaining where we're at versus not investing and stagnating. So it helps educate them about the different paths that things could take depending on the choices that they make. It also helps to educate them that it's not just about what they're choosing to do, it's about what their competitors are doing. So inaction can lead to stagnation and getting surpassed by their competitors. It's a very visual tool. Another tool, tip number 6, headlines, taglines, and sound bites. My poor team, they hear me say this all the time. But another tool to overcome these obstacles is to help the client focus on what's really important. And there are 2 main ways to accomplish this. So if you're anything like me, you secretly love it when you audit a brand's SEO portfolio and you have a to-do list of SEO action items like a mile long. It means I can help. So selfishly, I love it. But let's be honest, people are really bad multitaskers. I know I am. And they need help prioritizing. That's a huge cognitive burden. So empower your client to focus on one big thing at a time. What is the most important thing that a client should care about right now? And we do a disservice to our clients when we push every single recommendation at once, like a giant laundry list. They get bombarded and overwhelmed. They tune out. So there's nothing to grab onto and nothing gets done. And it seems counterintuitive that you get more done by proposing less stuff, but it actually does work. You want to give them sound bites they can sell. You have to make it memorable, and your client has to actually go sell this internally in their organization in order to get it prioritized. So help them do this by just giving them catchy headlines and taglines that they can repeat to their bosses and colleagues. So this is a real slide from a real client deck. My colleague Jeff did this. So we knew that the biggest opportunity for this particular brand was content development. So we put this at the top of the deck, and all other priorities were shorter sections and later in the deck. And we made this big, clear headline statement. Web content is the single most important SEO initiative in 2018. And we spent the lion's share of our strategy meeting supporting this and talking about how to ladder up to larger initiatives and how to collaborate to get more mileage out of content. And then long afterward, we kept hearing clients saying the same exact line unprompted on strategy and status calls, both agency facing and internal calls that we were just listening in on. The message was clear. And what I love about this is they were talking about it as if it was their own idea. It's like the inception of planting priority ideas in their heads. Okay, final tool in the toolkit, you guys. Patience, persistence, and parallel paths. Where possible, you should build parallel paths. You can start the highest impact, but maybe time-consuming projects right away because you know it's going to take time to get them approved and push them through. But simultaneously, what are other lower obstacle tasks, maybe with fewer blockers that you can be working on? You can have several irons in the fire, which increases the likelihood of getting stuff done. When the client is focused on the big move that needs big approvals and big resources, you can keep trucking on smaller wins that are going to get them excited and build momentum for the bigger stuff. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'm going to close with just simple yet powerful words of advice that come up again and again and again in my research. Getting your work implemented is a balancing act of patience, persistence, communication, and follow-up. There are a lot of things at play, so approach it with empathy and understanding, not assumptions and frustration. Come with confidence and a strong point of view so your clients or your bosses can put faith in you and your recommendations, and you make it easier to say yes and invest. But above all else that our peers recommended was to stay strong. Thank you so very much. Are there any other questions that I can answer for you all?
I'm not seeing any other questions popping in just yet. So we'll give it just a few minutes for people. If you guys want to pop in your questions, definitely pop those in there. That was awesome. That was super great.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was some excellent information and some great questions that had come through earlier too. So we'll just kind of get this, I'll start wrapping this up a little bit. I don't know how, but somehow it's already been basically an hour. It seemed like it flew by. So that's awesome.
Well, thanks.
Definitely, if you guys have any other questions, feel free to pop those in there. As I mentioned at the top, we also have questions available through Twitter. So if you guys come up with something later on, or you do try to implement some of these actions and you decide that you want maybe a little bit more information, definitely feel free to reach out to Heather or us, and we'll more than happy to see if we can help provide some clarity on that.
Absolutely, we would love to.
Looks like John's saying he'd love to shoot you an email. So if you want to grab that down, awesome. Thank you, John. thank you guys all for coming again and being willing to just hop on these. Heather, thank you so much for being willing to be a guest again. It was fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me. I love what you guys are doing. Thank you for making the time and effort to educate SEOs who are stuck at home right now. And hopefully we'll all be trickling back to normal soon.
Yeah, we're doing our best, and it's been really fun. We've been home for a little while now, but we're hanging in there. So it's been really good. And we get to hang out and talk with awesome people such as yourself more often. So, I mean, silver lining, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I'm feeling more connected than ever even.
Good. Awesome. Well, we're about to get drowned and blown over in this giant storm that's just rolled through here. And halfway through your presentation, I was worried that we were going to lose internet connection because it started storming. Oh, there's Poppy.
Poppy is a famous SEO dog. I saw in the Q&A from Andrew, where's Poppy? You guys promised me Poppy. Well, there she is, being responsible.
Oh, good. Perfect dog. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Heather, for joining us. We'll have to do this again soon.
I would love that. Thank you all so very much. Talk soon.
Awesome. Have a good one. See you guys.